Kakegurui is a twisted anime, with characters that made me go, yeah, give me more of that! If you like your anime girls helpless and demure, this show is not for you. But if you appreciate women who are powerful and in charge, this series might be right up your alley. Today I'll be analyzing the psychology of the show's characters, especially the main two boss ladies, Mary and Yumeko. I love when a movie includes awesome women, and the ladies of Kakegurui definitely fit the bill. Usually in anime, if there's a cool, powerful woman, her strength lies in physical violence, and she's ultimately under the thumb of a male character. But these ladies' strength lies in their willpower, ambition, and social manipulation. Sure, they're all really hot, but this is an anime. We already knew there would be short skirts and fan service, but I love that they're allowed to get a little ugly once in a while. Their faces contort with raw emotions, something I usually only see from powerful male characters. It shows just how passionate and unhinged these characters really are. As a lady viewer who never really related to the fluffy waifu types, this was a refreshing change. Finally, some strong-willed ladies I can relate to. Though maybe that's not a good sign. I also appreciate how these characters were actually fleshed out and developed. You can tell each gambler apart by her personality, weaknesses, and goals instead of just what hair color she has. Thank you, writers, you done good. Kakegurui takes place at a private academy for wealthy kids who will grow up to be the nation's political and business leaders. The student body is obsessed with gambling as a sign of social status. The theory goes that if you want to rule over people one day, you need negotiating skills, the ability to read others, and to balance risk and reward. Apex gamblers become members of the powerful student council with nearly limitless wealth and power. The losers who rack up the most gambling debt become the school's house pets and are the degraded servants of the rest of the student body. This power hierarchy represents the real stakes of the show, but more about that later. The first time we see our male lead, Ryota, he's the pet of a student named Mary after getting deep into debt with her. She's bossy, cocky, and I'm sure some people are instantly going to hate this character for it. She's a polarizing character like Asuka from Evangelion, but if you like the Asuka type and her domineering relationship with Shinji, you're probably going to like the dynamic between these two. But this time, Mary's met her match. She challenges the new transfer student named Yumeko to gamble, thinking she'll be an easy mark. Little does she know that Yumeko is the best of the best and came to this school specifically to get her gambling freak on. Mary doesn't have gobs of money or a famous family name like some of the other students. Her strengths rely entirely on her wits and her ability to manipulate people. She's got Ryota and lots of other students under her control who help her cheat. Usually a character who cheats like this would be portrayed as an immoral villain, but at this school, cheating is fine as long as you don't get caught. After all, gambling's just a symbol for how good someone is at twisting circumstances in their favor. Mary takes an early lead, but she overextends herself and ultimately loses. Instead of Yumeko becoming a house pet, now Mary is one. At this point, if Mary was simply a villain, we could say she's been put in her place and justice has prevailed. But her story continues throughout the series, and I'm going to argue she was actually a pretty complex, ethical character. She matures and changes more than most of the other characters. Now that Mary is a pet, her old friends suddenly turn on her, but she holds up well. Unlike Ryota, who resigned himself to his house pet fate, Mary refuses to quit. She doubles down and challenges a member of the student council to another high-stakes gamble. You could say this is foolish, but I think it's pretty gutsy considering she's just been burned. It also shows that Mary doesn't just prey on gamblers she thinks are weaker. She's got the guts to take on the best. But the council member cheats, and instead of regaining her status, Mary finds herself drowning in debt. No shame in losing to this particular council member, though. Later in the same episode, even the talented Yumeko loses to her. Now Mary is in so far over her head, she's assigned something called a life plan. Since she can't pay her debts, the student council is making her pay with her future life. They've determined everything about Mary's future, from the politician she'll marry to how many kids she'll give birth to. Yumeko's in the same boat. Jeff from Mother's Basement asserts that there isn't much tension in the life plan as a punishment.
For Yumeko, losing means that she'll get bullied a little, and one day she'll have to marry a rich guy who the student council president wants to control and who's kind of weird and creepy, but otherwise she's still rich and married and rich.
But you know, rich and married doesn't mean happy, right? She's basically being sold off as a child sex slave. And choosing a spouse is one of the most important decisions of your life. Wouldn't you want to pick based on chemistry and attraction rather than being assigned some rando creep? I'd further argue that Yumeko is more than just bullied a little. On her first day as a house pet, she was nearly raped on campus. But even if you think that marrying some rich creep isn't that bad, the life plan still doesn't sit right with Mary. She will be free and take her life back no matter what. Honestly, I think this says more about Mary's character. If she was sure to marry a monster, then she's pretty much forced to fight her fate. In this case, she's offered a gilded cage, but she still says no. Her personal freedom is more important than financial security. To win her way back out of debt, Mary temporarily teams up with Yumeko, which shows how forgiving Mary can be. After all, Yumeko was the one who landed her in debt in the first place. She could have easily held a grudge and refused the alliance, but together, they both win their freedom. Yumeko offers her hand in genuine friendship, and Mary accepts. Not only that, but Mary also forgives the classmates who bullied her earlier. She would be justified in holding a grudge and treating these girls like crap, but she does forgive them. It's water under the bridge and down the drain. The student council president is impressed by Mary and offers her a position on the student council, which would come with unlimited power, money, and prestige, but Mary turns it down. This echoes her defiance of the life plan earlier. Even when offered financial security, she'd rather be free to forge her own path than live comfortably as someone else's pawn. Contrast her with Kirari, the student council president who enjoyed setting up twisted social experiments. She created the house pet system to turn the whole academy into a fish tank, a closed system where the strong devour the weak. Visually, she's portrayed in cold blues in contrast with Yumeko's fiery reds. Her fingernails resemble fish scales, and she's often framed along aquariums as a symbol for the big fish eat the little fish system she's created. Her personal presence inspires both fear and worship in the student body. In spite of her cruelty, several students are madly in love with her. It's that kind of show. Some viewers object to the protagonist Yumeko as being too perfect, but I think that description really belongs to Kirari. Both women have almost unlimited financial resources, but Kirari also holds unlimited power. We never learn what makes Kirari so talented, she just is. She never fails or even falters, and that's pretty dull when compared to a whole cast of other characters who have something to lose, and they frequently do. Yumeko also has nearly limitless wealth, which some critics objected to.
Yumeko is as flippant about throwing away 1 billion yen as she is 10,000 or 100. It doesn't do much to get us invested in whether she'll win or lose.
I completely agree that money is made irrelevant in this show, but I'd argue that's a strength rather than a weakness. I don't find fictional characters' fictional money especially interesting, and it's certainly not necessary to make an emotionally compelling story. For instance, Batman is super rich and he's still an interesting character, and his adversaries aren't motivated by greed either.
It's not about money, it's about sending a message.
There's plenty of drama to be found in the psychological rather than the financial. After losing an eye to gambling, would you be crazy enough to gamble the other one? Would you take a position of wealth and power from someone who sees you as less than human? Would you put your own fingernails on the line when money isn't enough? The stakes here aren't about the poor becoming rich or vice versa. In Kakegurui, everyone's rich, which makes for an even playing field. Instead, the stakes are about losing or reclaiming one's humanity. Everyone's born equal, but social hierarchies are what degrade or elevate people. Money might be more tangible than loss of humanity, but it's not as personal or as emotionally intense. After all, people love money enough to kill for it, but they also commit murder over issues of dignity and self-respect. As a viewer, I found it more engaging to have money removed from the equation. It left me with more thought-provoking questions like, how do I respond to oppression? Or, what would I actually do when I'm in a position to oppress others? So yes, Yumeko is incredibly wealthy, but it's her personality and unique world perspective that makes her so interesting. Ryota clearly idolizes her, and he's not the only one. Even though she's skilled, Yumeko occasionally loses. Sometimes it's intentional as part of a larger strategy, but sometimes her enemy just outsmarts her, or she has bad luck. And Yumeko likes it that way. Gambling loses all thrill for her when the outcome's already decided, even if it's in her own favor. Unlike flawless characters like Kirari, characters that occasionally fail are interesting because we can see how they respond. When Ryota fails, he feels ashamed and wants to withdraw. When Mary fails, she becomes furious and defiant, and when Yumeko fails, she completely owns it. After all, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. When she's been outfoxed, she accepts the outcome and plays the part to the fullest. In this sense, her personal philosophy resembles Stoicism, which encourages a Stoic to accept things as they are instead of how you wish they'd be, especially things outside of your control. Through this radical acceptance, Yumeko can be defeated, but never truly crushed. She never gets upset, but it's not because she doesn't face hardship, she just has a unique way of dealing with it. Unlike President Kirari, we can see a host of skills Yumeko employs to win. She has strong memorization skills, the ability to manipulate dice and calculate odds, but her greatest strengths lie in reading other people and making allies rather than enemies. She reminds me a little of Griffith from Berserk, a natural leader who attracts allies almost effortlessly, driven by unquenchable desires. Both have a calm exterior with plenty of craziness under the surface. They both take sickening risks and put everything on the line to get what they want. But with Griffith, he's wearing a mask, using a sweet facade to trick people into thinking they're friends when he'd really sell that person out in a heartbeat. Yumeko, on the other hand, wears her heart on her sleeve. She's a strange person, but she genuinely is who she appears to be. She has moral lines she won't cross, and she genuinely cares about her friends. I didn't find her to be an especially relatable character, but I'm not sure she was meant to be. She's more like a legendary hero who inspires others around her and helps other characters find themselves. For instance, Yumeko and Mary team up against another duo, some jerk and a house pet under his thumb named Tsubomi. The guy keeps browbeating Tsubomi to bet and fold, so the game always tips in his favor, and she always obeys out of fear. While they're playing, Yumeko starts asking this girl some valuable questions. What are you getting out of this? Are you gonna suck up to this guy for years hoping he'll be nicer to you? Are you gonna live your entire life like that, with your head down? This again made me think that Yumeko follows a Stoic philosophy. Stoicism points out that nobody gives away their money for free. So why are people so free to give away hours and years of their lives to people who don't deserve it? Tsubomi thinks about Yumeko's questions and decides she's tired of sacrificing her life to the jerks of the world. She's taking back control. I find these philosophical themes a lot more interesting than the trite, follow your heart kind of message you get in other shows. It's actually thought-provoking for the viewer. I mean, I try to avoid conflict as much as possible, and I'm sure many of my fellow introverts do too. But this episode brings up that people-pleasing has its own price, and sometimes it's not worth paying. The fingernails-obsessed Sumeragi is another character that Yumeko influences with her philosophy. She has more money than skill, and tends to be indecisive about taking big risks. Yumeko tells her the bigger her ambition is, the greater risks she'll have to take. An Olympic athlete might have to give up their entire youth to training, and after that still not win at the games. This metaphor comes straight out of a Stoic philosophy text. The bottom line is to count up the cost and then go for it, but don't claim you want big results if you're not willing to put in a big investment. Yumeko's self-indulgence proves she's not a perfect Stoic, but there's a lot of method behind her madness. Even when she manipulates her enemies, it's usually for their benefit as well as hers. For instance, she ruins this guy's prestigious political future, but in a glimpse of his childhood, we can see he never wanted that future, it was just what his parents chose for him. By defeating him, Yumeko has set him free to find his own path. She also beats a teen idol at gambling, revealing her contempt for her own fans in the process. But it turns out her fans still support her, so now she doesn't have to resent them. Throughout the series, Yumeko also takes the lead with Ryota, who acts as her right-hand man. He's a sweet beta guy, my favorite, who helps Yumeko however he can. She takes Ryota under her wing and brings him to private gambling matches where no one else is allowed, and lets him share in her successes. He didn't seem too thrilled about being controlled by Mary, but when it comes to Yumeko being in charge, he's pretty into it. Her reckless gambling makes him nervous, and he tries to warn Yumeko about especially risky moves, but he never tries to stand in her way. Similarly, Yumeko likes Ryota for who he is and doesn't try to change him, but she does set him up with opportunities to be bold and take risks. She puts him in tense situations where he has to take action and overcome his fears, but if things go wrong, she'd be the one to pay the price, not him. She nudges him to grow without forcing his hand. I really liked these two as a duo. So if you're a fan of feisty female characters and twisted, thought-provoking psychology, I highly recommend Kakegurui. And if you prefer your ladies more passive and unemotional, what the heck are you doing on my channel? I plan to make Boss Ladies an ongoing series, so if you've got a favorite female you'd like to see featured, leave a suggestion in the comments below. I absolutely do use fan suggestions to decide what to do next, so don't be a stranger.